Hello, welcome. In this lecture, we will discuss about version control systems in Agile. Especially when you are doing a software project, you need a system wherein you can control the version of the file. The version control basically means you are tracking changes to the file. It is especially important when you are doing a software development project. There are two different category of version control systems. One is called centralized version control system. Another one is distributed version control system. Now let us understand both of these version control systems and how they work. This is the diagram which represents the difference between the centralized version control system and distributed version control system. The centralized version control system, also called as CVCS, you can think of it as a single library, that is single repository here, right? The centralized version control system has a single repository. You can think of it as a single library in a city where all the books and files, that is in a software project, it is code and files are stored. Whenever you want to read a book or update it, you have to go to the library, that is a central server. Here in the centralized version control system, you have a one repository and many working copies. These are working copies, right? This is a centralized repository located on the server. Let us understand how it works. All files are stored on a central server. Every time someone wants to work on a file, they have to connect to the server and get the latest version of the file. When they finish their change, they send it back to the central server. Once you make the changes here, you send it back the changes to the server here, that is the repository. The advantage of centralized version control system is easy to manage because only one central place where all the files are stored. Everyone always working on the latest version of the file. But one of the disadvantage of centralized version control system is that if the central repository, that is this server where this repository is located, goes down, no one can access the file. You are accessing the file from this central repository, which is a server. If this server goes down, no one can access the file. You always need an internet connection to connect to the server. These are the two disadvantages. One is if server goes down, no one can access the file. Also, you always need an internet connection to access the files in this repository because this repository is located in the remote server. In a centralized repository, there is only one repository that is located on the server and each user will have a own working copy. On the other hand, the distributed version control system, for a distributed version control system, instead of a one library, you can say every person has their own copy of the entire library. It means each of this repository is a copy of this repository. Means each user has his own copy. They can read and make the changes to the book, that is their own library, at home without needing to go to the main library, that is central server. Each user, this is a user, imagine this is the user PC. This is in user PC. This part is located, this working copy and this repository are located in the user's personal computer, and this one is located on the server side, right? So each user can make a changes in their own repository. It means they no need to get connected to the internet, right? Each user have their own copy of this repository. Let us understand how it works. Here, every developer has a complete copy of the project in their own computer, right? Here, three different copies there in separate computers. They can work offline and make the changes to the file locally. Without needing an internet connection, they can work offline and make a changes here. Once you complete your change here, you can push this code to the central repository. Once you complete making changes here, you can push the code to the central repository so that other users can pull your changes back to their own personal repository, that is the repository located on their own computer. The advantage here is developers can work offline without needing to connect to the central server. Even if the central server crashes here, they still have a copy in their own machine. Using that, they can continue their work. It is faster to work locally as you do not need to constantly communicate with the central server. Once you complete all your changes at a time, you can push the changes here. So you are always making a changes here in your working copy. That's a local repository. One of the disadvantage here is it can be harder to manage if many people are making a change at the same time, because everyone has their own copy. Suppose let us say file A, I make a change here. Another user also making a change to the file A. Then both of them are pushing this change here. Then there can be a conflict. So we need to manage that properly here. That is one of the disadvantage here. If multiple users are making a changes to the same file, then conflict can arise. So in distributed version control system, there are many repositories. One repository is, this is a remote repository. This is the remote repository, and these are all local repositories. It means they are located in the user's computer. The key difference between centralized and distributed version control system is, in centralized version control system, there is one central server where everything is stored. This is the one central server where everything is stored, and everyone will connect to this and make changes. In a distributed version control system, everyone has a complete copy of the project. It means here one copy is there, here one copy is there, here one copy is there, right? Everybody has their own copy in their own machine, and they only share the changes when they are ready. Once you complete making the changes here, you will share back by pushing your code to the remote repository. The example for centralized version control systems can be SVN, that is called subversion, perforce or helix core. These are two different examples. SVN is one of the widely used centralized version control system, but nowadays most of the companies are moving to distributed version control system, because you always do not need to get connected to the central repository. Even without internet, even without having an internet connection all the time, you can work. And also, even if the central server goes down, you can still continue working here, right? That is the advantage of distributed version control system. The examples of distributed version control systems include Git and Mercurial. Nowadays, this is not being used. Only this is the very famous tool. In the coming lecture, we will understand how we can set up Git and how we can push the code to the GitHub. This Git will work with GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, etc. You can integrate that. In the later in the course, we will learn how to set up Git and GitHub. In our own PC, we will set up the Git, and GitHub is a remote repository, and we will see how we can push the code from our own computer to remote repository, and if any changes are done in the remote repository, how we can get back those changes. We will see both of these things. Is called push operation. This is called pull operation. Now let us understand the distributed version control system in more detail, because this is the one widely used version control system. Distributed version control system we can represent in the picture like this. Here is the workstation or PC. User 1, this is the first user, second user, third user. Each have their own working copy. And this is the repository, local repository. This is the local. All this is located in user's own computer. And this is located on the server side. This one, this is a remote repository, right? This Git is installed in all user computers, and the GitHub is a remote repository. And here local repositories. These are all local repositories located in the user's own computer. You make a changes here, and first you save the changes in your local repository. Once you complete making the changes, push the code to the remote repository. Then you will pull back the code from the remote repository to local repository. If somebody else makes a changes, you can get those changes here, right? Each user will push the code to the remote repository once they complete making the changes. If this user wants to get the changes from this user, then he need to pull it from here to here. If you want to get the latest copy from the server, you need to do pull operation. If you want to send your changes to the remote server, you need to do push operation. Later in the course, we will learn how we can do push and pull operation using Git and GitHub. Thank you for watching.